Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to October's full authority meeting for Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. This is, as members will know, the first meeting that we've done virtually. So we are being webcast, as it were, on the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue YouTube version. So we'll have great delight later on today to see exactly what we said, because it will be there for posterity. Just a little housekeeping point, and we all know this because you've already done it already, which is no videos and no microphones when you're not speaking. If you want to speak, please indicate to me in the chair and in the chat bar, and I will make sure that you speak. I will always, before taking a decision on an item, make sure that everybody has had a chance to speak should they wish to. So in saying that, just as a warning and to help the process, we are actually going to do a roll call because the hands up system doesn't work properly on the WebEx, and we're not seeing the hands going up. So if you could, so we'll do a roll call, but that won't be, unless anybody specifically requests it, it won't be a recorded one. So Steve Yates will call out your name, and then you will respond in the normal fashion. The items which we will probably take as a formal vote are the minutes. So the minutes of the various committees, the additional. Have I got the right ones, Mike? Sorry, the ones where we need to take a vote are 7B, 9, 10, 11, 12, 17, and that's it, just so you're aware. So, in formally opening the meeting, we are now going to go to item 1, which are apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure whether you heard that. We have received apologies from Linda VJ.
Oh, I am here at the moment, Steve. I may have to leave. I am here at the moment.
Oh, apologies.
Chairman, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Lip reading is going to be a good thing to learn, I think. And is Sue Mount Stevens with us this morning? Because otherwise we'll register her.
Chairman, sorry, I should have said we have also received apologies from Alison Hernandez and Sue Mount Stevens.
Lovely. Just wanted to make sure they were recorded. That then takes us on to the meeting of the authority held on the 18th of February on your pages 1 to 8. And unless there is any dissent, and also the public meeting of the extraordinary authority held on the 13th of March on pages 19 to 20. I will take it that you all have an opportunity to read those and that you are in agreement that we approve those. Is there anybody to the contrary? Fine, thank you very much. I will sign those at an appropriate moment. I'll then take us on to item 3, which is urgent items requiring attention. I have none. Part 1, open session. Item 4, questions and participations from the public. I have none. Item 5, addresses from representative bodies. I have none. And item 6, questions from members of the authority. There are none. That will then take us on to item 7, minutes of committees. First one is the Audit and Performance Review Committee on pages 21 to 32. Could I call on Councillor, the chair of that committee, Councillor Mark Healy, please, to move his minutes?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. As said before the meeting started, I'm having trouble with anything visually, but I can hear everything that's going on. So it gives me great delight to move the minutes of the meetings. But first of all, I'd like to thank George Wheeler, of course, who actually chaired the meeting in March on behalf of myself and the vice chairman. So yeah, it gives me great pleasure to move the minutes of the meeting that were held from pages 21 to 32 on the 4th of March and the 7th of September 2020. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Is anybody got any dissenting on that one? Nothing has been advised, in which case we all agree those. We then move on to 7B, which is the Resources Committee on pages 33 to 54. We will need to do a formal vote on this particular one. So could I call on the chair of the committee, Councillor Dreen, to move his minutes, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd formally like to propose the minutes of the Resources Committees held on pages 33 through to 54, held on the 2nd of July and the 12th of October, which are attached.
Happy to second both of those, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm taking that was Simon. Thank you.
Yes, sorry. My apologies, Chair. Yes, it is.
Lovely. I recognise your voice.
Oh, thank you.
And at the moment, I've got one speaker, which is David Thomas. David?
Thank you. Just wish to declare an interest, obviously, as a non-executive director of Red One for this item and potentially items in part 2. Thank you.
Thank you. That is so recorded. Councillor Saywell, I see you wanted.
So I also do the same, Chairman.
Thank you very much. That is also recorded. As nobody else is indicating they want to say anything, could we then please formally go into the roll call on recommendations, which are printed on our papers on page at the beginning of our agenda.
I'm on the phone. I've got to do it on the phone. I'm just doing it, I'm told.
Andrew Eastman, welcome.
I do apologise. I accept those minutes, yeah.
No, wait a minute. Oh, you're going to be called. And I'm not doing the calling. Steve Yates will do the calling.
Thank you, Chair. If you're ready, I'll do the roll call vote now. Could members please indicate either for or against or abstain? Councillor Best.
For.
Councillor Biederman.
For.
I don't think Councillor Bowen is with us. Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Clayton.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Colthorpe.
For.
Councillor Corvid.
For.
Councillor Doggett, I don't think is with us. No. Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Eastman.
For.
Councillor Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Napper. Councillor Napper.
For.
Councillor Peart.
For.
Councillor Prowse.
For.
Councillor Radford.
For.
Councillor Randall Johnson.
For.
Councillor Redman.
For.
Councillor Saywell.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Trail.
For.
Councillor VJ. Could you repeat that? Sorry, Councillor VJ.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Yabsley.
For.
Thank you. That's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much indeed, members. That then takes us on to item C, 7C, which is Community Safety and Corporate Planning Committee on pages 55 to 58. Could I call on the committee chair, Councillor Redmond, to move his minutes, please?
Thank you, Chair. As always, thank you to all members that took their time to come and attend our meetings. Just to remind everyone that they are open to members of this authority, and of course members of the public should they wish to come and listen. I'd like to move the adoption of minutes of the Community Safety and Corporate Planning Committee meeting held on the 16th of July 2020, as included with the agenda for today's meeting. I would also like to ask the authority to note that minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October will be submitted to the next full authority meeting for adoption, Chair. I move.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Margaret. So, is there anyone in dissent? We'll take that as carried. Thank you. That then moves on to item 7D, which is the Appraisals and Disciplinary Committee on pages 59 to 62. And as chair of that committee, I am formally moving those minutes for the meetings held on the 27th of July and 27th of July and 25th of September, both of which are attached on your papers. Could I call on a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second that for me, through you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. And any dissent? Thank you very much indeed. I'll take that as taken. We'll then move on to 7E, which is the Standards Committee held on the Standards Committee on pages 63 to 64. Could I call on the chairman of the committee, please, David Thomas, to move his minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move the adoption of the minutes of the Standards Committee held on the 6th of August 2020, showing on page 63 and 64, and request a seconder. Thank you.
Trial second. Jeff Trial second.
Thank you, Jeff. Seconding that. I see no dissenters on that. We then move on to item 7F, which is the Human Resources Management and Development Committee, which is chaired by Councillor Hannaford. Councillor Hannaford, can I ask you to move your minutes, please? I know Rob has problems sometimes with the connections.
Chair, could I just say that the minutes of this particular meeting aren't included with the pack, and because of the date of the committee, which is only 2 days before this, it's intended that they should be submitted to the next full authority meeting for approval.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm sorry I forgot that. I didn't have it written down in front of me. So that concludes the minutes of the meetings that have been held since the last authority meeting. We now move on to item 8, which is the report of urgent actions taken under Standing Order 27, which are on pages 65.
Thank you, Chair. Because it was only a day or so ago, I'd like to...
Rob, I think we got the message.
Chair, I'm not sure if you heard that or not.
We did, well, partly. But it was my fault. I should have not called you because those minutes will be taken at the next authority meeting.
Okay. I was just told to do what Councillor Redmond had done previously, which was to refer it to the next meeting, but I'm not sure if you heard me or not.
It was intermittent and it was my fault because I could have covered that off for you. But everyone is content for that to happen. So it's not.
All right, don't worry, Chair, carry on. As long as you're happy.
Yep, at the moment, very. We're now moving into item 8, which is a report on the urgent actions taken under Standing Order 27 on pages 65 to 68. And I'm also going to take the additional paper that we have, which is 8A, which is the response for the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service on the COVID-19 pandemic on pages 1 to 56 in our additional papers. Could I call on the Chief Fire Officer, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members and colleagues. The first item, so item 8, is a report back following urgency decisions, and they're articulated in the paper. So hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't propose to go through it. I'm conscious there's some substantive items on the agenda. So, but very happy to take any questions. I think it's probably just worth saying that at the beginning of these urgency items, we didn't have the technology and we didn't have the power to operate virtually as we are now. So I think as we move forward, we're going to be more we're going to be relying less on urgency decisions and more back to what members would anticipate and expect the decision making for the authority are. So very happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for saying those few words, and absolutely we do need to drive forward our ability to be able to operate virtually. And thank you to the team who managed to actually bring this forward, because you know perfectly that I have been very keen to try and get this facility available to members, because we live in geographically far-flung places. So for a lot of the work that we do, it does make it a lot easier to be able to have these virtual meetings. But it also creates all those other problems as well. So I'd like to thank the Democratic Services team for sorting things out, but look forward to being able to migrate onto Teams as soon as we possibly can. In which case, could we then move on to discuss?
Sorry, Madam Chairman.
Mark, yeah, Mark.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chairman. You clearly, I say, because I've got no visual, I'm trying to do it on the chat line. But yeah, Lee, really good news. I was really pleased to see the collaborative working, of course, across the region, and with the police and the ambulance service. Great bit of work. I know it could be what I'm saying is controversial, because clearly there are those out there that don't want to do this practice. But I really believe at this moment in time that everybody coming together to help, nationally and internationally, of course. The fact that we're putting people first, I think, is a really good thing. So and as you know, I sit on the Fire Service Management Committee where that was discussed, and I think every force that's joining in, every service are doing a really good job. So I just wanted to make that, Madam Chairman, through you, a bit of public knowledge. Thank you very much.
Mark, absolutely echo all the things that you've said on that front. It is about collaborative working, and we are doing an immense amount of work, not only with the police, but also with the ambulance service, being the two, we're part of the family of the 3 blue lights. On item 8A, Lee, did you want to comment anything, to make any further comment on that paper, or were you concluding in what you said previously?
I think, Chair, in terms of hopefully the papers, I apologise for it being quite, but in some respects it does show just the breadth and complexity of some of the issues we've been dealing with in terms of the COVID response. Just picking up on Councillor Healy's point, I agree. I mean, our staff have been amazing, and they've put themselves forward. Our partners have been amazing. We've worked really closely together. We're a long way from having this sorted, as members will know. And actually, this second wave, I think, has all the potential to be worse than the first wave. So we're far from complacent, and having to be vigilant and strike that balance between protecting the public and protecting our staff. And I think we've got that. I think we've got that right. So I'm grateful for all of the officers that have developed that approach, and I think it puts us in a good place. I think rather than go through the paper in detail, probably just draw a couple of examples out in terms of the key achievements. Primarily the ambulance service driving that firefighters have attended. That's about to recommence on the 1st of November, so those numbers will increase further. And that comes at a time where the Ambulance Trust is under pressure. And so our support, not just locally but regionally, is very much welcomed by ambulance service partners. And long may that continue. And there's an awful lot that has come through this experience, whether it's through the way in which we enable and support staff to work remotely, whether it's through the use of video technology such as today, and us being able to reduce our costs as a result of that and make it more user-friendly, increasing that accessibility to members of the public who can watch fire authority meetings. There's a huge amount of positive that we're going to try and capture from what is a really challenging period, not just for the organisation, but for the nation and actually the world. So we are lessons from where we've been, but far from complacent. last 2 points really. The mini IRMP that I've reproduced in full. Members will be aware that some of the graphs will look very familiar because they've been provided in the regular updates. But we put this in full. There's a lot of detail in here that we use to drive our internal arrangements. And Annex B, which after printing it out myself, I don't know if others had the same problem. We didn't produce this, but it doesn't translate very well in terms of a printout, so apologies for that. But it does show just the strength of working collectively and the fact that we're working as a group of chief fire officers and fire services in the region. Probably the strongest that I've experienced that is a real strength for us moving forward, whether that's improving efficiency and effectiveness moving forward, sharing good practice, working across borders. All of the improvement work hasn't stopped. In fact, we're pushing on really hard in terms of learning from what we need to do in terms of improvement following HMI's inspection. But I think we're in a pretty good place, but it's down to the testament of the commitment from our staff and our partners, and I'm very grateful to them. So thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
I've got two speakers wishing to speak. I've got Lee Redman and I've got Andrew Saywell. So could I call on Lee first, please?
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me. I'm looking through the papers, Lee. I don't recall this mini IRMP, the COVID-19 one. I don't recall seeing it at CSCP.
No, it's not been produced. It's produced on a weekly basis, and so what we were doing is we produce it and we were sending it around. The graphs were included within the weekly updates when we were at the peak, and then the monthly updates. So some of the graphs and the performance information I've shared with all members. There's no reason why we couldn't produce and share this with CSCP. Specifically, we could do that, or we just need to think about what that looks like it's a report that's produced on a weekly basis, and obviously CSCP will look at this in a point in time. But there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't provide a report to CSCP talking about the performance in the previous reporting period. I'm really happy to take that as an action, Councillor Redmond, if that's helpful. But the report itself, the mini RIP is produced weekly, and what I'll start to do as the pandemic is increasing again, I'll start to brief members on a weekly basis as we step up. So the graphs you'll see through that route, but we can do a stock take and take a formal report to CSCP if that helps.
Thank you very much for the response. Sorry, it just took me a little bit by surprise because obviously the CSCP has responsibility to help bring the IRMP into position, and this gives an impression that, to me, I looked at it and I thought, just a second, I chair the committee and I didn't know anything about it. So what you actually, it's more an enhanced, I suppose, it's a weekly risk assessment, I assume, rather than an integrated risk management plan. It's just it's an addendum to our original IRMP. I know what you're saying, Chief, and I thank you for that, but it's just it was a little bit confusing when I first saw it, so I apologise for that.
Chair, through you, I think that's a really fair point as well. We have called it a mini RMP. It is a snapshot of performance across people, service delivery, and the wider environment. And I think actually Councillor Redmond's point's a good one. What this isn't doing, this is about producing a performance, and it's about reporting back, rather than necessarily fundamentally changing the way in which we deliver the service. In some areas, we'll have done that because we'll have had to make adjustments to the way in which we do prevention and protection work, and a lot of that's in the paper. So we're having to be dynamic. But I think if we do that, we'll take that as an action. I think it's a really, really helpful suggestion, Councillor Redmond. We'll take that as a paper for subsequent CSCP. So you are cited on what's happened in that period of reporting as well.
Before I call Andrew Saywell to stay there, Andrew, I just want to enhance on what had just been discussed, because I think I'm right into my question is, it's the members who approve the integrated risk management plan, it is not the officers. And on that basis, to strengthen our governance arrangements, I am absolutely in agreement with Councillor Redmond that we do need to have some form of governance if we are calling it a mini integrated risk management plan. But I might be thinking about making that as a recommendation on this particular item. But can I take Councillor Saywell first, please?
Thank you, Chair. You've stolen my first question because I was going to follow up exactly on what Councillor Redmond was talking about. I do think if we are talking about having a mini IRMP, members have got to have oversight of that. Because if there is another HMI inspection and the inspectors pick up that this document has been released and the members will say, we've not seen this, I don't think that is a particularly satisfactory situation. So I do think that I totally agree and endorse with what both the chair said and what Councillor Redmond said. I did have a particular question on page 8, which was home safety visits. Are we able to continue these in as COVID secure way as possible, even if we do go into another lockdown? Because whilst I certainly do not want to put any of our staff at risk, I'm also worried that there's a lot of vulnerable people out there and people who will need home safety visits. And if there is any kind of lockdown again and all of that work stops, we put people at greater risk. They might not, they might be protected from COVID, but they could then be at a greater risk of being involved in a house fire, which could be entirely avoidable. So if the Chief could expand on that, I'd be grateful.
Chair, if I'm able to, can I just deal with the mini RMP issue first? Just because I think we might be confusing the issue. If members are absolutely right, the RMP is a matter for members to agree. Where the balance needs to be struck is that clearly if there's a change that comes through national guidance as to the way in which we conduct activity, whether it's operational response, then clearly that will have to be put into effect anyway. And we will do that to protect our staff based on that delegated element of maintaining staff safety. I think what we're actually doing in this is we're not changing the policy. The RMP and the strategic intent that members have set remains the same. The way in which we are delivering that is based on the risk assessments and based on national guidance. So we're not actually changing the RMP. That would be a matter for members. So I think we have confused this by calling it a mini RMP. And my strong recommendation would be that actually we just change the name of that and we just have that as a reporting mechanism, because it's not actually fundamentally we've already agreed. Should we look to do that, then absolutely that's a matter for members that we would need to bring back. So if, for example, we change our risk-based inspection programme and we have that as a policy change, that will be a recommendation from officers that will come to members. At the moment, this is just reporting back our performance against the current RMP, and it is a reporting mechanism rather than a policy changing mechanism. So that just an observation on that. I think we've confused that, so we can happily change that. And in the event that we are looking to change the RMP, absolutely that should be socialised with CSCP, and then it comes back to the authority. That's not what this is aiming to do. Councillor Saywell's point about home fire safety check, really key observation, absolutely right. And not only have we got to strike the balance between our own staff and the public, but the way in which we deliver advice now is different. So we can deliver a significant amount of advice over the phone for members of the public who don't want to have people coming into their homes for whatever reason. And there are people that have asked us not to come into their homes at the moment, and they're happy to take advice on the phone. And that is a balance, and that's a negotiation between our service delivery team that do booking home fire safety checks and the individual. So we look to meet their needs on all occasions, and wherever possible, we will do that over the phone as well. Where that becomes a little bit more difficult is if we're replacing smoke detectors and items like that. But that isn't something that we necessarily have to do at a particular moment in time. So, and in the event that we do go into people's homes, we will clearly wear the appropriate PPE, and that protects both the individual and our staff. So it's a really good point, and it is a really good example of how we're having to adapt to the way we deliver services pushing more over the phone. So some of the risk visits are done over the phone. You can do a certain amount of advisory work over the phone, but there will always come a point where you need to do a more detailed intervention, whether that's through a protection visit, an enforcement activity, or whether it's a vulnerable person with a home fire safety immediate need. And we will do both of those face-to-face with appropriate control measures if needed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's still on the theme of the home safety visits. We have a member who actually received a home safety visit during the lockdown period. I wonder if that particular individual wishes to speak or not, to share their experience. If not,
I have to say it was absolutely brilliant. It was arranged within 48 hours. He was thoroughly professional, came with full protection and installed a new arm for me. I cannot recommend the service highly enough. If I'm causing trouble here, but I have told all of my constituents, and I've written something in the local newspaper to say that it's something they should take advantage of if they can. I couldn't have been more impressed.
Thank you very much indeed, Linda BJ, for that, because I know that you've done some excellent work with your communities on exactly that point. And that's why I was really pleased when you indicated that you had an incredibly good service from the home safety team coming in and during the COVID period, particularly helping those most vulnerable people. So on behalf of the authority, back to Lee and the team, who are actually carrying this out. Thank you very much for the work you're doing, not only in the homes, vulnerable, but everyone, but also with the help that we're providing to businesses when they're trying to maintain a safe environment, not only from protection from COVID, but more importantly, to make sure that any of the interventions that are being put in don't have any impact on fire safety aspects of their buildings. So absolutely applaud the work that the organisation is doing to help support the communities generally across Devon and Somerset. Lee, I'd like to also on behalf of members to thank you for these updated information that we were receiving during the particular lockdown period before we got our technology sorted. It has made a huge difference. And it is really important that the organisation continues to talk with your authority members, because you can see through Linda VJ's comments around the home safety how effective members can be in trying to spread the safety message to our communities. If there are nobody else wishes to speak on this particular item, and there is no dissent, I will take that as generally agreed, and thank you for that. That then takes us on to item 9, which is the proposed policy on the disposal of land on pages 69 to 74. This will be an item that we will do a formal vote on at the end of the session. So again, if anybody wishes to speak, please indicate. This has arisen as a direct result of the Safer Together programme that we were agreed back on the 10th of January, gosh, almost a year ago, when we were looking to modernise the service. And as a result, I think this is probably the first time that the organisation has been thinking about disposing of land which is no longer required, whilst it has been in combination. I think any previous sales or changes had occurred under the previous regime that we were working on. So could I call on the Director of Government and Digital Services, please, to take us through this paper? Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so thank you for that introduction, Chair. So yes, absolutely. At the authorities meeting on the 10th of July, the authority made decisions following the consultation on the Safer Together programme. Part of those decisions related to the closure of 2 fire stations, one of which was Budleigh Salterton. The decision to dispose of Budleigh Salterton was actually taken using the urgency procedures, which was set out in the previous paper that the authorities just considered. And that decision to dispose was on the basis of the most economically advantageous terms for the authority. So during the process of disposal of Budleigh Salterton Fire Station, an issue was highlighted that we felt we needed to bring back to the authority in relation to asking the authority to confirm what its policy is on the disposal of land. This stems from Section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972. That's the section that deals with the disposal of land by local authorities. And that section basically says that, except with the consent of the Secretary of State, authorities must dispose of land for the best price that they can reasonably obtain. At the authority meeting on the 10th of January, a question was raised, and the authority was correctly advised that the well-being powers provided under Section 2 of the Local Government Act 2000 don't apply to combined fire and rescue authorities. What we didn't know at that time was that in 2003, the then Secretary of State had issued a general disposal consent that allowed local authorities to dispose of land for a consideration less than the best that can be reasonably obtained, i.e. at an undervalue. And that can only be done if specified circumstances apply. We've checked this and had legal advice, and it's confirmed that that general consent remains in force and it does apply to the authority. The specified circumstances for exercising the discretionary power that the general consent provides are where the authority considers that the purpose for which the land is to be disposed is likely to contribute to the achievement or promotion or improvement of economic, social, or environmental well-being. That is equivalent to the well-being power provided under Section 2 of the Local Government Act. Accompanying the general consent in 2003, the government issued a circular which provided some guidance on the use of the discretions that the consent provided. When disposing of land at an undervalue, it says that local authorities must always be cognizant of their fiduciary duty. And as such, the circular provides that it's generally expected that land should be sold for the best consideration reasonably obtainable. One of the important factors is that any decision to dispose of land at an undervalue should be taken in light of securing for the authority a tangible benefit relevant to the functions of the authority. And importantly, that benefit needs to be quantifiable in financial terms. So in undertaking this consideration, the circular also advocates that authorities need to have regard to their community strategy. The community strategy stems from a part of the 2000 Act, which doesn't apply to this authority. So this authority is not required to have a community strategy. Principal councils are, or I should say were, required to have a community strategy because that element of the 2000 Act has since been repealed. So basically what this means is the exercise of the discretion that the general consent allows, and in doing that, an authority must have clearly established before land is put onto the market a purpose for which the land is to be disposed that is likely to contribute to the achievement, promotion, or improvement of economic, social, environment, well-being. And that process is proactive rather than reactive. So it needs to be in the authority's mind at the time it decides to sell land. And the undervalue of that land itself must have a tangible benefit relevant to the functions of the authority, as I mentioned before. So The advisory circular that accompanied the general consent was issued to give authorities autonomy to carry out their statutory duties and functions. Now, the important thing is that for this authority, effectively, it has a single function to provide fire and rescue services for the community served. And as the wellbeing powers provided under Section 2 of the 2000 Act don't apply to this authority, it doesn't have any statutory duties relating to the promotion or improvement of economic, social, or environmental well-being. So it does start to become a little bit complicated. So this, coupled with the fact that the authority doesn't have a community strategy that would have dealt with things around environmental, social, well-being, economic well-being, etc., it means that the authority could have considerable difficulties involved in seeking to objectively justify an undervalued sale for a purpose that couldn't be linked back to the functions of the authority. That view was supported by the legal advice that we obtained. And additionally, the risk is that if the authority couldn't objectively justify an undervalued sale linked to its functions, it could be exposed to a challenge of judicial review for failure to follow due process, irrationality, or both. Finally, affordability of the authority's capital programme is also a key consideration here. The authority's current objective is to avoid any new borrowing with the objective of reducing debt charges into the future. And so the advice is that the authority should be making the best use of capital receipts when they arise so that those receipts can be used as part of the capital programme funding. So, members, it's as a result of those considerations that it's recommended that the authority adopts for the disposal of land, where the general rule is that such disposal should be on the basis of seeking to obtain the best price possible from the market. So, Chair, that's an overview. There are some complexities involved in this, but hopefully the recommendation on the policy is reasonably straightforward. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. The first person I've got is Mark Healy. If there's anybody else wishing to speak, could you please indicate? Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Oh, Mike, thank you so much for simplifying this paper for us all. I'm sure we all understand it totally. But, you know, you made, you know, to be fair, no, you've made a very good job of that. And I understand the implications that's gone on. But what I'd like to say, and I think you've covered 3.1 on page 71 quite well. Thank you very much for that. But we all must remember we're living in the most unusual of times. At the end of this month, if not next month, even though the government's extended very kindly, if you like, lifelines to businesses, I think we're going to go down a road where, unfortunately, you know, property, as we know, industrial property, etc., is going to be lying around basically. So glad to see about the caution, but through you, Madam Chairman, if I may, as you said quite rightly so, let's not give it away. I think we own it lock, stock and barrel. If it comes to a point where the market does take a massive dive, I would ask through you, Madam Chairman, that we actually put it on hold totally till hopefully we do come out quickly as we can through this COVID-19 incident. And if you like, put everything on hold until it's over and done with. We're not. I don't think we're strapped for cash. I'm not sure. I'm sure we're not. But it's an air of caution from me, if I may, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Well, Mark, I appreciate those comments that you made. We are simply on this item just approving a process. We are not trying to hamper or fetter ourselves in any way as an organisation. And the point that you make about getting best value and our fiduciary requirements as an organisation require us to go for best value, to get the most we can from a particular sale. If we think that we are selling something that is under value, then absolutely we have every right not to continue at any particular stage. If I could just take you back to the Budley Salterton process, that was put on the market and has now, because it was no longer required from this organisation, because we've moved the operations to our Liverton base in Exmouth. And so it is around saying that this land is no longer required for us. If we don't wish to continue looking after that land and have the insurance issues and all those other things that an empty building creates a target for, dare I say, arson and other antisocial behaviours. So as an organisation, we moved swiftly to say it's no longer required and it has been disposed of, and it has been disposed of at a rate which is satisfactory to the taxpayer. It is the taxpayers who are the ones who actually need to make sure that we are not squandering money. So you're right, we have money in the bank at the moment, but when you are talking about the financial situation of the country, I can see our grants from government and our collection from the council tax over coming years becoming increasingly more difficult and more challenging. It is around being prudent.
Thank you. If I may come back, Madam Chairman, if you don't mind. I totally agree with everything you've said. And I think you've answered my question, thank you very much, is the fact that, as you said, we are going into very peculiar situations. As you said, quite rightfully so, it is the taxpayer we're beholding to, and rightfully so. What I'm just trying to stress, if I may, is that even in times of difficulty, there are all those people that try to capitalise out of everything. So I'm trying to say, so I wouldn't like to see us, because of the situation that, yes, the country, the world is printing money like it's going out of fashion at the moment, that we just don't give something away for the sake of it. But you've answered my question, and thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Healy. I have got 3 people wishing to speak. Amy Webb wishes to come in, and I'm going to call her first. I've then got Rob Hannaford and then David Thomas. So, Amy Webb, would you like to go first, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to offer some assurance to Councillor Healy about the process that we undertake when looking to dispose of land or actually enter into any commercial transactions for purchases, for that matter. And that is that we would involve commercial agents in that valuation and process. So if the advice were to come back that actually the market wasn't in a good place at that time, we would take that into consideration in any proposals for disposal going forward, or whether we could use that land or building for alternative uses in the meantime. So I say just a bit of assurance over that process, that we wouldn't want to rush in to the market at the wrong time.
So could I then call on Councillor Hannaford, then I'm going to call on Councillor Thomas, and then I'm going to call on Councillor Saywell. So Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I think it was myself that actually raised this last time in regard to Topsham Fire Station, which I'll talk about when we get to that item. But I do think from the report, particularly 2.3, you've got those 3 elements there: promotion of improvement, economic well-being, etc. So I think I take away from Mike's report that one thing we need to do, which I'd like to propose, is the fact that as an authority we do develop a community strategy, in part because I think that's what we should be doing overall, but also it then takes this report to the next level in terms of, should the occasion arise when we are in this position, that we've got that strategy to back up our decisions, but also give reassurance to those local communities that we're also taking their views and needs into account. I understand that we do have a fiduciary duty, and I also think the conclusion of the report is correct, that by and large we should be disposing of land or buildings for the best value. But I also think there's the other issues around many of these sites, the older sites in particular, would have been perhaps raised by subscriptions. They may have been gifted to the public for general sort of social good, and therefore I think there's a historic sort of moral value in going back to the communities and actually having that conversation about some of these issues. And I also think having a discussion groups and local charities, etc., isn't necessarily going to mean that we don't get best value, because these days with things like lottery funding, for example, it could well be that we could still sell the site at a market value, but it could still be for the public good. So I do think we do need a community strategy, and I do propose that we should do that as a piece of work, to make sure that we're not just seen as a sort of rapacious private developer, but we're actually a public body that, while we do need to try and aim for best value, still has a duty to work with the wider community for social cohesion and improvement. Chair.
I've got I absolutely sympathise with Terry Napper. I've got you, and I'm going to call you after Andrew Saywell. Mike, I've got you as well. And the point I was, Mike, I'll call you in now.
Thank you, Chair. It's really just to come back on the point that Councillor Hannaford was just raising. Therein lies the difficulty. The authority does not have the vires that principal councils have, that was provided by virtue of the Local Government Act 2000. So the authority does not have the powers to develop community strategies on the basis of social well-being, environment well-being, economic well-being, and that you really do run the risk of actions there being ultra vires. The only aspect where the authority could consider doing things for the community in terms of economic, social well-being, environmental well-being, is in this very narrow field of disposal of assets. So the authority couldn't use any of the budget that it raises for those purposes to invest in economic redevelopment or social well-being. That's not a duty of this authority. And that's what the paper is trying to articulate, that this, in exercising the discretions allowed by the general consent, it does pose some real problems for this authority that a principal council may not have. And that's why the paper it's not saying the authority should fetter its ability to exercise those discretions. That's why you've got the recommendation laid out as it is. But members do need to understand that that there would be significant difficulties in doing that in a way that was safe and was compliant. And when I say safe, I mean safe in terms of not exposing the authority to the risk of the decision being challenged by some means such as judicial review.
Thank you for that. So could I call on David Thomas, please? Then it could be Andrew Saywell and then Terry Napper.
Thank you, Chair. Originally mine was going to be a question, but I will change it because basically, I mean, I think this is a very unusual situation that members who have lots of experience at their primary authority finding things different and potentially difficult, because basically the fire authority doesn't have the benefit of Section 2 of the Local Government Act 2000. That well-being power doesn't exist within the fire authority. That was going to be my question, which Mike has absolutely confirmed where I thought we were. And so for members, we are in a very different position sitting here as appointees on the fire authority, that we don't have that well-being power that we would have if we were sat in our primary authority, and therefore we need to look at this very differently, or at least with different eyes than we ordinarily are used to looking at. So although I support the sentiment exactly of the previous speakers, in this particular instance, and for the fact of what legislation we have to work with the fire authority, I am supportive of the document that's on the table as it sits, basically because I see this as filling a gap in our policy arsenal that we need to. But I do, as I say, understand the issues that members have raised. But for me, By trying to put some of those issues into the report, we would actually end up tripping ourselves up further down the line. Therefore, I am happy to support, and I would be happy to approve or second when we get to that situation. I don't want to preempt any debate, but I'm happy to put that offer on the table. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Were you actually formally moving the recommendations?
I am quite happy to formally move, but I didn't know if I could because I understood that Councillor Hannaford had already put something on the table, and I didn't want to railroad if it was already on the table. If there's nothing on the table, I'm happy to move it.
There isn't actually anything on the table at the moment, but partly to allow the debate to grow. But the comment that Councillor Hannaford made could be incorporated in an amendment. And that's all. I just want to sort of help the organisation move forward on this particular item.
Okay, well, I'm happy to move it, to put it on the table, and that way it allows others, well, first of all, to get a seconder, and then allows others to put amendments forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So could I call for a seconder for that, please?
Jeff Trail.
Thank you, Jeff. Did you want to speak, or will you speak later?
No, I'm happy to let that go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in which case, can I call on Andrew Saywell?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I would echo the comments that Councillor Thomas has made, and I think something I am very much kind of agree with what Rob Hannaford has said, but I would also say I would want us, even if we could do a community strategy, I don't want us to duplicate the work that our constituent authorities and also our district councils would be doing as well. So I think we would have to think very carefully about how we would engage with that kind of situation anyway. But I'm personally very content with the report. As Councillor Thomas has very eloquently explained, we are in a different position here as an authority, in a different legal position. I'm supportive of this policy. I think it's clear and simple, and I think it is something that we do have to have in place. So I'm happy to support the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. And could I call on Terry Napper?
Chairman, what concerns me, I agree with the report, but what concerns me is going back to page 68, that we have a market valuation of 125, and then we sell it for 3 times the amount. Now, maybe a question for Amy: is that going to mess up our asset value for the accounts? And how do we how can we explain that in our accounts value? Because our capital value is possibly 3 times greater than what the accounts say. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I think I'm right in saying that, Terry, you're referring to item 8 on the previous papers.
I'm going back to take in that valuation. Yes.
Sorry, the point I'm just trying to make is that we've actually finished that item. I'm not closing that debate down about what you're asking of process. Absolutely, we need to understand how it arrived at. So if I could call in Amy Webb, please.
Thank you. Just to respond to Councillor Napper's point about the accounting valuation, this doesn't represent an issue, as our policy of valuation for our fire station assets is based on a depreciated rebuild cost rather than a market valuation. So they are 2 separate things. In terms of the difference between the valuation and the price achieved, obviously there's considerable local interest in the property as a whole, so the building and the land, which was unexpected, but obviously a really positive result. And what that means is we're able to put that money back into our capital programme. So effectively, that's equivalent to buying a full-size fire engine for us.
Thank you for that, and that is actually very encouraging, because we are in need of replacing quite a lot of our equipment. I don't have anybody else indicating that they wish to speak. So, Jeff, you seconded the motion. Did you want to speak at this point? Otherwise, I'm going to call on David Thomas to sum up. So just so we're clear, we're going to go into a vote. I just want to ask Councillor Hannaford if he wanted to make any amendment.
Chair, thank you. But with the advice I'm getting from the officers, I'm not sure if I can make that recommendation, because they're saying we're very cautious about going down that route, and we're not sure we want to, do that. But nevertheless, Chair, you know that we've got a lot of fire stations in the wrong place around the authorities' area, and this is a thing, I think, an issue that's going to come up time and time again. And I think we ought to be seen as working with our local communities, rather than giving them the double whammy of saying, right, you're losing your fire station and we're going to sell it off for some luxury development or second homes in the local community. So I'd like some guidance on whether or not I can actually put an amendment down for a community strategy or not, please.
I didn't hit my mute button. Mike Pearson, could you provide him with some guidance on that particular point, please?
Yes, I can, Chair. Thank you. The advice I would give that it would be ultra vires for the authority to be establishing a community strategy in the way that was envisaged in the Local Government Act 2000. So my advice is that wouldn't be possible, and so that an amendment around that would potentially be ultra vires. What I would say, though, to Councillor Hannaford is that the recommendation is deliberately worded so that when specific cases come up in terms of a disposal of land that the authority owns, and we're talking about fire stations principally here, this proposed recommendation does not fetter the authority's ability to look at individual cases to see whether or not there are circumstances where the authority may be willing to consider a sale at undervalue that do relate back to the authority's core functions. My view is those would probably be very limited in terms of the amount of times that would come up because of the need for it to relate back to the core functions of the authority. But the policy is, the recommendation is set out deliberately so that this does not fetter the authority's ability to exercise discretions, but it does establish a very clear policy that as a general rule, in any disposal, the authority will seek to achieve best value.
Thank you. Chief Fire Officer, you wish to speak? Lee, are you indicating you want to?
Sorry, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just an observation, really, just to support the discussions. Should members wish to put an alternative arrangement in place, that would have to be prior to advertising the sale, for fear of otherwise potential bidders wouldn't know the criteria against which they would be selected against. So I know we've got another item on the agenda. We'll come to that point, but it's paper as well. So Mike's point's absolutely really strong. Should members decide that they wanted to apply a different approach ahead of any disposal of any future site, we'd need to do that prior to marketing that in order to be clear and fair and transparent to everybody.
Thank you for those comments. As nobody else is indicating they wish to speak, this is the authority's opportunity to have a policy on the disposal of land. The points that were just raised by the Chief Fire Officer can be considered when we move forward, but we need to establish our policy in the first place. Just for clarity's sake, I wonder if I could I'm going to call on David Thomas to sum up, but could I call on the clerk to the authority to actually read out the recommendations, because we've got it written in front of us, but anybody listening on YouTube wouldn't know what we were about to vote on. So could I call on the clerk to the authority to read out the recommendations, please?
Certainly, Chair. Happy to do that. So the recommendation is that, given the issues outlined in this report, the authority determines that its policy on disposal of land will be A, as a general rule, to seek to obtain the best consideration or price that can reasonably be obtained, and that the discretionary power to dispose of land at less than the consideration that can reasonably be obtained will be exercised only in exceptional circumstances and must always be subject to 1, an independent assessment prior to the sale process commencing of the value to the authority of any terms and conditions which might be attached to the authority to the sale, and 2, any terms and conditions to be imposed by the authority being consistent with its functions.
Thank you very much. And could I call on Councillor Thomas, please, to sum up before we take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. As I say, this is an unusual situation that we find ourselves in, but the policy does leave us with an open door in individual circumstances without fettering our position. It does actually fill in the gap of the policy that we actually need to. And for me, it all does revolve around the well-being power of the Section 2 Local Government Act 2000 that does not apply to us here at the Fire and Rescue Authority. That's what this, for me, that's the decision that actually it hinges on. If the power of well-being absolutely was within our gift, I'd be looking for a different route. But because it doesn't, and to keep us on a legal footing, I'm happy to move this and would urge all members to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I then call on the roll call to start, please?
Thank you, Chair. Again, as I call out your name, could you please indicate either for, against, or abstain? So, Councillor Biederman.
Approve.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Clayton.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Colthorpe.
For.
Councillor Corvid.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Eastman.
For.
Councillor Hannaford.
Abstain.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Napper.
Agree.
Councillor Peart.
For.
Councillor Prowse. Councillor Prowse. Moving on to Councillor Radford.
Yeah, for.
Councillor Randall Johnson.
For.
Councillor Redman.
For.
Councillor Saywell. For. Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Trail.
For.
Councillor VJ.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Yabsley.
For.
That's carried by majority. Clear majority, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for everyone for that debate. It was a really important one to establish a policy. That then takes us on to item 10, which is the proposed... That takes us on to item 10, which is the proposed disposal of Topsham Fire Station on pages 75 to 78. Could I call on the Chief Fire Officer, please?
Thank you, Chair. And members will recall from the debate in January that there was a request on officers to bring it back to the authority, specifically on plans to dispose of Topsham. That is this paper. So there are options available to members following on from the previous item. So there is, just in terms of setting the scene, the capital programme, as members are aware, the needs for us as a service, as a second largest service outside of London in terms of capital needs, are significant. We used to receive government funding to support some of that capital infrastructure replacement. That no longer happens. We have to fund that ourselves, as we know, and members have been very prudent in recent years with Amy's advice, and have put some money aside to meet forecasting needs for vehicles and some estate refurbishments and replacements. And we're starting to see some of those, such as at Brixham, coming through. So the capital needs moving forward are going to be significant. They will continue to be significant. Members will know from seeing their local fire stations that we are not blessed with the best fire station stock. So the recommendation here is that disposal, now it's surplus to requirements, or it will be at the end of the year from an operational perspective, as the changes agreed in January are fully implemented, that we then dispose of Topsham for best value. But in accordance with the previous recommendation, clearly this is the time, if members do wish to apply that discretion that Mike has outlined, members have and have retained within the policy position. Now is a time to indicate that, if now is where you would like that discretion to be applied, and then we will bring an arrangement together that almost certainly will need to be agreed by the authority before we dispose of Topsham. Alternatively, members could agree to just dispose of it, secure best value, and then that will be a softening of the financial pressures for the capital programme moving forward. So Chair, very happy with Mike's support and Amy's support. Very happy to take any questions on this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. At the moment, I haven't got anybody indicating that they wish to speak on this particular item.
Yes, please, Chair.
Excellent. Hang on a second before I call you to speak, Jeff. Is that, and Councillor Hannaford, would members mind when they want to speak, making sure that they've got it set up in the chat bar to go to everyone, rather than just to Stevie Yates, who is the host of the meeting, so then I can see it in advance. So could I call on Jeff Trail and then Rob Hannaford?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chief, Budley Salterton did not have any discretion, and it wasn't viewed at that particular time. And I think that the process that we actually went through was fair and reasonable for the authority, which is what we're here for, to look after the authority and our firefighters, and to make sure that they have the correct and the right equipment to actually continue their service to the general public. So therefore, with the previous recommendations, I think we just need to carry on exactly the same as we did with Budley Salterton, as we are with Topsham. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then could I call on Rob Hannaford, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I mean, as you know, I raised this issue before because the closure of Topsham Fire Station was a controversial move by the Fire Authority. I think a good compromise has been achieved with it moving to the HQ and being renamed and re-established. So I think, you know, we have gone all the way to actually deal with that. But nevertheless, I have to say, I'm sorry, I don't feel that this paper actually reflects the spirit of the discussions that we were really had at the previous meeting. And again, the reason why I abstained just now, Chair, is I have a feeling that I'm going to be told by the officers in a moment that we can't even consider having a reduced value on Topsham because it doesn't meet our narrow set of criteria as a fire authority. But nevertheless, I still think that it's worth having a discussion with the local elected members and the charity and voluntary sector in Topsham before we go out to the market to see if there is it can be turned into a community hub or there is some feasible business plan or strategy that can be put together. This former fire station, as we all know, is at the heart of the local community in Topsham. And anybody that knows Topsham, it has a tremendous sense of community spirit, a big voluntary and charity community there. So if there was ever a place in Exeter or even Devon perhaps where they could put together a business case and make things stack up, I think Topsham would be that place. And I think they ought to be given that opportunity to do so. If after having that discussion and perhaps a meeting with yourself and the local members, it comes back that there is not an appetite to do that or it's not feasible, then I would, agree that yes, of course, in looking after the fire authority, we should, then go for the best value and go forward on that basis. But I do think we have to be careful. I think we have to respect the local community in Topsham. So I would like to propose an amendment that you have a meeting with the local county member and the 3 city members and representatives of the local community to explore options around community use for the site before going out to the market at full market rates. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Well said, young man.
I will call you in a minute, Mr. Councillor Eastman. But first, Rob, that you can't move an amendment at this stage for the simple reason that we don't have a proposal on the table. So I'm going to ask you again if you wish to make that
with respect, move the motion or the recommendation.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Rob.
Yeah, I thought that you did have something on the table because Councillor Trail had proposed it.
No, he spoke in favour of it, but he didn't formally move it because I didn't ask for a seconder. And the reason why I am at this point suggesting to you that you might want to make a proposal is because on item 13 in our papers, we are having another, the request is that we have another formal meeting of this authority in December. And I think on the basis that we haven't had a policy up until this point, we have experience of the sale of a building, a redundant fire station in Budley Salterton very recently. When we started that process, we didn't know we had discussions that only came to light during the process. Absolutely, there might be a question of saying at this point, we might want to think about what we do before we take the next step. That's
yes.
why I am suggesting to you that you might want to make a recommendation.
Well said, Madam Chairman. Well presented.
Chair, as a point of clarification, are you saying that you're prepared to withdraw this item and not approve it today?
No. Well, we can either defer the whole thing. Which I actually liked what you were saying, that we need to consider all options before we make the decision.
Yes.
And so I'm just going to call in the clerk to the authority to give me some advice on what I have just been saying. So Mike Pearson, please.
Thank you, Chair. It would be entirely proper for Councillor Hannaford to propose that officers explore options for community use before marketing, before making any final decision on disposal. So if Councillor Hannaford wished to make that as the proposal, if that was then seconded, and if that is then carried, then that's what officers will do, and then they will bring back a paper to a future meeting of the authority with potential options. Those options will explore in detail the vires and the legal basis on which the authority may or may not be able to do some of the things that might be thought to have some community value. So members can rest assured that that's what we would do during that time. We would do the due diligence on making sure that it was really clear what the authority could do within its powers and what the options might be for the authority. So if Councillor Hannaford is happy to propose that motion, I would suggest it simply that the authority explores options for community use before making any decision on disposal.
Excellent. Hear, hear.
So could I call on Councillor Hannaford to see if he wishes to move that? And then I will ask for a seconder.
Thank you, Chair. I am content with that suggestion and happy to propose it.
Thank you. And could I call on a seconder for that, please?
I will be delighted to second that. Councillor Eastman.
Thank you, Councillor Eastman. So that's on the table. Now, I've got various people who have indicated that they were making comments on this. I just want to make sure whether any of them wishes to speak on this particular item. So I've got the Vice Chairman of the Authority, George Wheeler, Lee Redman, and Simon Cole. So could I call on Lee Redman, on the Vice Chairman of the Authority, please?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I indicated just before Mike Pearson gave us his suggestion, and just after you had made your very clear suggestion that we might do what in fact Mike said. So I'm very keen to support the proposal that Councillor Hannaford has just made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Which case could I call on Lee Redman, please?
Chair, the last speaker took the words right out of my mouth, so I'm happy to support and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Coles, and then I'm going to call Councillor Biederman and then Jeff Trail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to support the current proposal.
Thank you. And Councillor Biederman?
Yeah, very, very supportive. Yeah, my question really is will the community know the sort of value that they would need to find, assuming that they will look into taking it on? That would obviously clearly help them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biederman. We will explore all of those. If this is successful, something would have to be prepared on that. I think I'm right in saying that. If I just call you first, please. Amy, did you catch that? That we might need to prepare some papers for the public? Okay, Mike Pearson. Sorry, Mike's going to go, I think.
If I can help with that, yeah. So the point is that in considering a sale at undervalue, the authority has to have a specific purpose in mind. For the authority to have a specific purpose in mind, it has to do that exploration of what interest there may be. So we will have to do things to explore what the interest may be. I would reiterate that the purpose that the authority may have in mind, based on the advice we've been given to date, would have to be a purpose that's consistent with the functions of the authority. And those would be the issues that we would explore in detail before anything was brought back to the authority. So hopefully that answers the point.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Jeff Trail, you've indicated you wish to speak.
Yes, please. I'm having a problem here. I understand I understand what's being said here. However, where will the authority stand? Because we did not give Budley Salterton the same opportunity. So I'd like to ask Mike where we stand on the legal side of that, because like I said before, I believe what we voted for in item 9 is dead on with item 10, and the object was that the finances are returned to the authority to spend for our firefighters and equipment. Where it comes a community base, we can't do that with this authority, but you can when you're in a district council. So we do not have that option. We did vote to say that we could have a look at this sort of thing. So I'm asking, yes, by all means, have a look at it, but I think we need to have an explanation for the good people of Budley Salterton, because they were not given that particular chance. Thank you.
Jeff, I absolutely hear what you're saying. At this stage, we are not saying that we are going to dispose of another property at a reduced rate. We are simply saying that we wish to explore the possibilities of what there is out there whilst we work within the rules and regulations which apply to our authority. There is no decision at the moment. To some extent, you could argue that if there is a community, as you had in Budley Salterton, which is really strong and had a clear view of what they wanted to use the building for, it gave them time to find the money to make the purchase. And I think what we are saying at this stage is we simply wish to explore whether there is any appetite in the local community for coming forward with a plan that would fit within our very tight criteria. Because obviously it would be inappropriate of this authority to make a decision which would be against our rules and regulations, because that would lead to judicial reviews. So I think that's probably, at this stage, we haven't quite got as far as what you're suggesting.
No, you've made that quite clear, and I thank you for that.
And in no way would we want to disadvantage anybody. So, Mr. Pearson, you're indicating you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And also just to address another point that Councillor Trail made in respect of the legal position with the disposal of Budley Fire Station, it would have no implication at all, because what we're talking about here is a discretion. The authority doesn't even have to consider exercising the discretion. The authority could quite legitimately just say, anytime we sell land, we're going to sell it for best value. That would be entirely consistent with the law. You know, whilst you can't say nobody would ever challenge that under judicial review, my view is they wouldn't get given permission to take that, because the law is very, very clear on what authorities are expected to do. So there's no requirement on any local authority to consider exercising this discretion. So I'm very comfortable that the decisions around the disposal of Budley and the sale of Budley are entirely consistent with the law and don't represent any risk to the authority.
Thank you very much. I've got David Thomas wishing to speak. Is there anybody else wishing to speak before I call on Councillor Hannaford to sum up? So, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I thought I'd speak as I moved the previous item, and I think, and I'm happy to support the recommendation that's on the table, because basically it fits entirely with the new policy that we've just approved, in as much as it left that back door open to actually look at individual circumstances. But what doesn't disappear is the well-being power is not invested in us. So the legal position doesn't change, but it does allow us to ask our officers to go and explore. But when they come back, I would expect any explorations to also include legal explanations with them about what we can do and what we can't do moving forward. And I think some of us are probably trying to preempt that debate today, and clearly that's a debate for next time. So I'm happy to support that's the kind of direction that we're heading in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I, as nobody else is indicating they wish to speak, could I call on the clerk to the authority to read out the recommendation before I call on Councillor Hannaford as the mover to sum up? So Mike Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is to explore options for community use before making any decision on disposal of Topsham Fire Station.
And Councillor Hannaford to speak to sum up, please. Rob, I don't know if you're speaking or not, but you are muted. I think there's a weakness in the system. I don't know if you're still with us.
Chair, I think we may have lost Rob at this stage.
Okay. We've had a good debate on this. I'm now going to formally request that we go to the vote on this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this will be a roll call vote, so if members can indicate when their name is called either for, against or abstain. So, Councillor Biederman.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Clayton.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Colthorpe.
For.
Councillor Corvid.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Eastman.
For.
Councillor Hannaford. Moving on, Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Napper.
Agree. Yeah, okay, I'll agree.
Councillor Peart.
For.
Councillor Prowse. Okay. Councillor Radford.
For.
Councillor Randall Johnson.
For.
Councillor Redman.
For.
Councillor Saywell. For. Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Trail.
For.
Councillor VJ, I think, has left the meeting. Councillor Weaver.
For.
Councillor Yabsley.
For.
That's carried unanimously amongst those present and voting.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, members, for that. That then takes us on to item 11, which is the environmental strategy on pages 79 to 94. Could I call on the Director of Finances and Resources on the paper to speak to her paper, which is attached?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. So this is introducing the draft environmental strategy, which we committed to do through the fire and rescue plan quite some time ago, slightly delayed over the summer because of coronavirus. So it's been a really positive exercise for a lot of people involved in the plan. We've been undertaking some research with other fire and rescue services and externally, and it's been a real collaborative effort holding workshops with our staff to bring together their ideas and priorities for our green ambition. Also, thank you to Councillors Buchan and Burridge-Clayton who have been involved in developing the strategy too. The strategy, sorry, the strategy is broken down into specific areas. Sorry, just getting a bit of interference there. Thank you. Which cover our people, our buildings, our journeys and our services. So to be really clear on our ambitions to mitigate around the environmental impacts of those. And as I'm sure you'll all be aware, as we're on this video call, some of those activities have actually been accelerated due to the coronavirus outbreak, and certainly looking at how we can work more flexibly in the future. So similarly to our people impact assessments, the intention is that environmental impact will be considered in all that we do and will become part of the way that we work. Similarly, we will have an initial process to review and baseline our emissions output, and obviously that will involve quite some work in terms of getting the data together so that we can start to measure and report back to members on our progress against that. So I'm happy to take any questions, but the recommendations are in the front of the paper about declaring a climate emergency, approving the strategy, and then monitoring through the APRC. Thank you.
The first two speakers I have are going to be Pam Buchan and Peter Clayton, because of their dual role as our environmental champions. Could I then ask anybody else to speak on this particular item? Please indicate. So could I call on and George Wheeler wishes to speak. So I'll start with Pam, then Peter, and then I shall go on to George. So Pam.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for not having a video. If I try and put it on, it's crashing. So I'm afraid you'll just have to hear my voice instead. Wanted to just say a few words about this. I'm so pleased to see the paper come to the authority, both the environment strategy and the climate emergency declaration. With the focus so heavily on COVID-19 this year, I think we'd all be forgiven for thinking the climate isn't a high priority, but COVID is a symptom of our broken relationship with the environment, and the events of this year really demonstrate how pressing it is to work to prevent runaway climate change and to stem ecological breakdown caused by human activities. I believe that as a public body, we've got a duty to do what's best for the public, and that includes accepting our fair share of responsibility towards the environment and to reduce impact from our operations. And part of that responsibility is the political acknowledgement of the climate emergency and a public commitment to reduce our carbon footprints and our environmental impacts. And as I've raised in previous meetings, we have to monitor and measure that progress to demonstrate our political will. As a fire and rescue service, we're really at the coalface of some of the most significant consequences of climate change in the region, particularly flooding and wildfire. And so we have a good understanding of the implications of not addressing the climate emergency. All our constituent authorities have declared a climate emergency and are working strategically to reduce carbon. Only this week I was in scrutiny where we were looking through Plymouth City Council's climate emergency action plan and corporate carbon reduction plan. And the Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Authority, as a public body, should likewise make this declaration. I'm confident this item will have the support of the authority. Our impacts are more than on the climate though, and there are aspects of our operations that will be particularly challenging to address, because we won't accept compromise on our ability to put out fires and to rescue people. The environment strategy identifies the areas where we can make changes within our offices and also whilst out in the field in action. And I know officers have been working really hard on this strategy for months now, particularly under the difficult circumstances of COVID, and I really appreciate that. And that myself and Councillor Clayton have had the opportunity to feed into it through our shared role as climate change and sustainability member champions. I think it shows the commitment of the service to the environment that the work's continued. So thank you to all the officers and to the staff who've participated in the various engagement activities. So if it's all right with you, Chair, I'd like to move the recommendations as they're printed on page 79, and I hope that the authority will fully support them.
Thank you for that. So could I call on a seconder? Peter Clayton?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd very much like to echo all Pam's comments there. I think this is a very good document. Thank you to Pam and Amy and all the team that have put this together. I think this is, whilst it's an excellent document, it is a skeleton of a document. It's something that we need to put the meat on the bones to. It's something that we need to move forward, and it's not going to be a 5-minute thing. It's not something we can put in the drawer. It's going to be a document lasting many, many years. And I believe the Audit and Performance Review Committee are going to have to play an important part in this to move it forward as well. Very much looking forward to it. I know Somerset County Council have just released their strategy. I'm sure Devon have done likewise. If they haven't now, they sure will do. So I look forward to working collaboratively with them, totally across the Southwest, to push this forward. And again, echo everything that Pam has said, and I would be more than prepared to second this. Exciting times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two further speakers. I've got Vice Chairman of the Authority, George Wheeler, and then Frank Biedermann. So could I call on the Vice Chairman, please?
Thank you, Chair. I support everything the two speakers have just said. A detail I'd like to ask if we've considered adding to the actions we're proposing to take in the next 18 months. This is on page 92. Whether we look at the environmental policies of organisations that we invest in. We invest something like £30 million at the moment. We have criteria for those investments, security of capital, liquidity and yield, all clearly very sensible criteria. Should we add a fourth one to consider the environmental policy of the organisation we're investing in? They're mainly banks. If one of the organisations is a leading investor in Brazilian mining, perhaps we should consider whether we want to invest in that organisation. I know it's an issue that it comes up sometimes with pension funds, and the argument is that you should always get the best value. We've just been talking about circumstances in which we might not get the best value out of a sale of land. I think we also consider whether the environmental policies of the organisations we're investing in are necessarily compatible with our environmental policies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. From a technical perspective, could I ask the proposer and seconder whether they're happy to incorporate that in the document? Or Amy, did you want to?
Thank you, and Councillor Wheeler, you make a very valid point, and it was actually a specific action which was included in previous drafts. And I think that because it was so tactical in terms of our treasury management strategy, we've just taken that on board in terms of the way that we work. So we've now introduced already that a minimum of 20% of our investment portfolio go into green funds, and are exploring that more with our treasury management advisors. And the way that will come out is through our treasury management strategy statement, which is part of the authority's annual documents and budget setting process. So in February, looking to formalise more around that arrangement. What we are struggling with at the moment is the lack of availability of those funds that meet the green criteria. So we have a couple available to us that also meet the security and liquidity and yield criteria, but we are looking to incorporate that where possible. So happy to take an amendment to the strategy or bring that through the treasury management strategy if members are minded to.
Thank you very much. I get the feeling from the Vice Chairman, I'm just going to double check with him, that he'd like that on both.
I'm quite happy that it goes through the investment strategy, Chair, rather than put in an amendment that might not introduce the sentiment I wanted. I think Amy was being positive, whereas I was being a bit negative and saying that we should not invest in certain organisations, whereas Amy was saying we should invest in good organisations. So I'd like my negative point to be taken on board as well, please. But I'm happy that it features in the investment policy rather than on page 92 of this document.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's clarified it. I've got Frank Biedermann and then I've got Andrew Saywell, and if there's no other speakers, I will then go back to Pam as a mover to sum up. Frank, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to everybody involved in this document. It's a really, really good document and an easy read and actions to follow and where we're going. So yeah, just one thing that I really picked up on, I guess. I mean, like like you say, is that it's great that we're doing these meetings virtually in a pandemic. I'm not sure about a full authority meeting. I think it'd be much better if we're all sat around a table, smiling at each other and looking at each other. But certainly the subcommittees and members' forums and things like that, I think very much could continue in this way. So I do wonder if something should be put into the policy and the immediate actions that we, because I mean, obviously we're going to need permission of government to carry on like that way. So I wonder whether we ought to be looking to sort of push that forward quite quickly, that we are able to continue when the pandemic's over. Hopefully that will happen fairly quickly and we will have full authority meetings together. And the other thing was the recommendations, on all our reports. We have resource implications and equality implications, whether an environmental implication should be included on each report, so that that's always there and we're thinking about the impact on our environment when we're making decisions. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to reiterate my thanks, because it's a really, really good starting document.
And could I call on Andrew Saywell, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would totally agree with Frank's point about virtual meetings. I do hope that we are able to continue having a lot more meetings virtually rather than travel. I welcome this document and I'm very happy to support it. I think the way I see it, this is a broad strategic document, and perhaps we are slightly in danger of going a little bit too far down into the specific details of things. So I'm more than content, I think, for some of the details, because I have some views myself, particularly on the use of vehicles, and bearing in mind we are a rural authority, very rural in my part of the world, and if you don't have a car or a vehicle, it's very difficult to get from A to B. But that's something that I'm more than happy to look at, I think, in the details of this policy away from this full authority meeting. I think it could be picked up by the Audit and Performance Review Committee, and so I'm very happy to support the recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak before I ask Pam to sum up?
Jeremy, absolutely. I've just asked, Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to support Councillor Saywell's words. I'm not driving 750 miles a month to meetings as I was. I've got 23 parishes in Southmotton Rural, and we must continue, I believe, to do as much as we can by this method. It saves a lot of fuel. It also saves a lot of time, and we can put more time to the job. I could do 3 parish councils in an evening now easily, and give them all valuable time, and be with you now that I can get on easier, rather than driving to Exeter and back for these meetings. So, Chairman, full support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pam Buckham, could I get you to sum up, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the comments that councillors have made. And if it's all right, just to say a couple of words in relation to those. Councillor Wheeler's request around divestment is really important and is absolutely in line with our principles of protection and prevention, going to the complete root cause of some of the issues that we address as a fire authority. So I would agree with that, and I'm satisfied with what Amy said in terms of it coming through Treasury rather than coming through this paper. Councillor Biedermann's comments are really welcome as well about having more online meetings post-COVID. I think under the current Act, we wouldn't be able to continue to have public meetings into the future, but would certainly be able to have our forum meetings, which are not public, at least those online. And I mentioned when I first joined the authority how much easier as a mum of young children as well that would be. So I think it's a win on many counts to be able to have more online meetings in terms of money and time and carbon. What Councillor Saywell says, I think, is correct, that this is really the strategy, and to go into the very individual actions in this forum is probably not the best place. But I think through the APRC, we could be, in our monitoring, we will be able to review those and any additional actions. And I would like to see this as a bit of a living document, because as we go on, the things that are available to us may change. There may be new technologies that we can adopt. So we need to be able to be reflexive and responsive to future situations as well. So I'm really pleased that everybody is, well, hopefully everybody, but certainly all the speakers are in support of this, and I'm happy to move to the vote.
Thank you. Before I do that, could I just, I apologise to members. I should have asked Mike Pearson as clerk for the authority if you wouldn't mind reading out the recommendation, because anybody listening in might not know what we're voting on.
Yes, Chair, very happy to do that. So the recommendations on this paper, the environmental strategy, are A, that the authority declares a climate emergency, B, that the service environmental strategy as appended to this report aimed at addressing by adaptation and mitigation climate change be endorsed, and C, that the Audit and Performance Review Committee, in consultation with the authority's climate change and sustainability member champions, be asked to develop appropriate targets and/or key performance indicators to facilitate monitoring by that committee of progress in implementing the service environmental strategy.
And could we go to the vote, please, on that one?
Thank you, Chair. Again, when I read your name out, could you please indicate either for, against, or abstain? Councillor Biederman.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Clayton. Councillor Clayton. Councillor Clayton. Councillor Coles.
Come back to him in a minute.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Colthorpe. Councillor Colthorpe. Councillor Corvid.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Eastman.
For.
Councillor Hannaford. Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Napper.
Agree.
Councillor Peart.
For.
Councillor Radford.
For.
Councillor Randall Johnson.
For.
Councillor Redman.
For.
Councillor Saywell.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Trail.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Yabsley.
For.
And going back to Councillor Clayton.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That is carried unanimously by those present and voting.
Thank you very much indeed. That then takes us on to item 12, which is members' allowances, further consideration of the Standards Committee papers on pages 95 to 102, report from the Director of Governance and Digital Services, Pearson. Is there anything further that you wish to add to this standard item, which has to come annually to the authority?
Chair, just by way of explanation, this isn't the annual look at members' allowances. This is specifically on the issue that I was asked to look at when the allowances were set for the current municipal year back in February. And this was to do with a view expressed that we should look at whether or not we should introduce a special responsibility allowance for members of the Standards Committee. Just before I start, I'll just remind members that when voting on allowances, there's no requirement to declare any interests. So this is disregarded in terms of pecuniary interest. So members, and specifically in this case, members of the Standards Committee, are able to speak and vote on this issue. So following on from the request in February, so this has taken a little longer to get back to the authority because of the situation we found ourselves in with COVID, but we have progressed it. We have considered the regulations and what the regulations allow in terms of the setting of allowances, and that's set out in the paper. We have done a review of the standards hearings and committee meetings over the course of the years since 2012. These standards regulations were introduced by the Localism Act 2011. And that analysis again is set out in the paper. I'm happy to take questions on it, but I'm not proposing to go through it because I think it's pretty clear. So in summary, the analysis is showing that that the committee does not meet with exceptional frequency. And whilst one of the hearings was a very long hearing, that was clearly an exceptional circumstance. Since then, the committee has reviewed the process for dealing with complaints and investigating complaints. And whilst we can't rule out that we won't have a long and complex issue in the future, I would suggest that the processes that we now have in place are better. And the conclusions of the report are that since the committee doesn't meet with exceptional frequency or in normal circumstances for exceptionally long periods of time, and having had a look at what the constituent authorities do, none of them pay SRAs to members of standards committee or dealing with standards issues. And from the research we did, no other combined fire and rescue authorities do. And the conclusion is therefore that we can see no basis on which to legitimately apply a special responsibility allowance for members of the standards committee. We rehearsed that issue with the independent consultant who did the last review of members' allowances, and they concur with those views and those findings. So happy to take any questions, but the recommendation is that the authority makes no changes to the approved scheme of members' allowances.
Thank you for that. I've got one person indicating they wish to speak. Are there any others? It's David Thomas. Could you, when you...
Chair, I'd indicated as well.
Sorry, who's that?
Frank, I'd indicated as well. I think we both clicked at the same time. That might be the problem.
I'm not getting them coming through on the public, on everyone. It's going privately to Steve Yates. If you could just think about sending it to everyone, it's just easier. They have to then send it on to
everyone, sorry.
So it just helps speed the process up. So if I could call on David Thomas first and then Frank Biederman. And if anybody else wishes to speak, if they would indicate, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to try and make this easy and to speed things up, as Chair of the Standards Committee, happy to move the recommendation that's actually on the table for agenda item 12. Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. And then could I call on Frank Biederman, please?
I've been trumped, Chair. No, fully support this. I was simply going to move it and make the point that we've also saved, like Councillor Yabsley said, we've saved an awful lot of travelling time this year. So in many ways, you know, our time has been managed for us, and hopefully that will continue going forward. So I think it's not an appropriate time to be thinking about putting up any of the allowances, and support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as there are no other speakers wishing to speak, could I go back to David? Do you wish to sum up?
No, happy to move to the vote.
Thank you. If we could go to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, if when your name is called, you could indicate either for, against, or abstain. The proposal is that the authority makes no changes to the approved scheme of members' allowances. Councillor Biederman.
For.
Councillor Brazil.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Clayton.
For.
Councillor Coles.
For.
Councillor Colthorpe.
For.
Councillor Corvid.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Eastman.
For.
Councillor Hannaford. Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Napper.
Agree.
Councillor Peart.
For.
Councillor Radford.
For.
Councillor Randall Johnson.
For.
Councillor Redman. Councillor Saywell.
For. Councillor Redmond, for. Sorry, I was struggling with my mute button.
Councillor Saywell.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
Councillor Trail.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Yabsley.
For.
Chair, that's carried unanimously by all those present and voting.
Thank you very much indeed. That then takes us to item 13, which is that an additional full authority meeting be held on Wednesday, the 16th of December of this year, commencing at 10 o'clock. I will move that from the chair. Could I have a seconder, please?
Do so, Chair.
Yes.
So I think that was Vice Chair, and I think it was Councillor Yabsley. Does anybody wish to debate on this one? If there are no dissenters on this, can I take it that we agree it? Are there any dissenters? There are none. So we'll take that as carried. That then takes us on to item 14, which is the exclusion of the press and the public. Could I call on the Vice Chair to move that, please?
Yeah. Yes, certainly, Chair. I think I have to read it out that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the following paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended to the Act. Items 15 and 16, paragraph 3, and for agenda item 17, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Move, Chair.
And a seconder for that, please.
Happy to second that, Ron Peart.
Thank you, Ron. And any dissenters to that? That is clearly carried. Thank you very much. We are now going to, for practical purposes, close this meeting. And I suggest that at quarter past 12, we come into the next meeting. Just a very short break. Everybody comfortable with that? And don't forget, when we go back into the second section, that you must remain isolated from other people. They cannot hear us. David Thomas, you're indicating, and then Mike.
Yeah, I just need to give my apologies for the part 2 meeting, as I've got another meeting that started 7 minutes ago. So I will be leaving now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mike.
Chair, could I just remind members they will need to rejoin on the second meeting invitation that was sent, not stay on this meeting.
Also, Chairman, please allow me to inform you that I must take my wife to an appointment, an important appointment to her dentist. I will have to give my apologies for not attending.
Thank you. Not a problem. And I hope everything goes well this afternoon. See you all at quarter past.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Attendance.
Cheers.